South Papua New Guinea back David Mead for up to 2 months because of an abductor tendon injury.
Paul Chamberlain got in touch to say, to be fair, seemed worse when he went off, so 8 weeks isn't too bad. I assume they could go back in for Gelling. Now he will be available on the cheap from Widnes. Well, his wage demands might still be high, so I don't know. They were rumoured to be back in for him in November, is what Paul continues to say. That or Yaha coming back will provide decent cover. Well, Yaha came back, played.
Yaha's back, yeah.
Contributed, still can't bend down to pick up a ball, but, it's back in the side. Wakefield, sorry.
Yeah, no, go.
Wakefield Trinity Centre Joe Arundel has agreed a contract extension at Bellevue until 2021. Arundel has been with Trinity since 2015. He joined the club from Hull FC and helped them to retain their Super League status that year. The 27-year-old, who began his career at Cass, has made 82 appearances for Trinity, scoring 18 tries. I can't remember him. I feel like 82 is quite more than I was expecting.
And he celebrated with a trip up to Newcastle to play on dual reg for them, or a trip down to London with them. Castleford Tigers captain Michael Shenton has signed a 2-year contract with his hometown club. The former England centre, who's now 32, rejoined the Tigers in 2013 from St Helens and has amassed 303 appearances across his 2 spells, scoring 148 tries for the club.
And probably about 448 try assists if the last 3 years had been to go back. Yeah. Tom Holmes has rejoined Featherstone Rovers on loan from Super League side Huddersfield Giants.
Yep, Castleford have extended a loan agreement with Featherstone for the services of Callum Turner for the remainder of the season.
Brandon Wood, Jordan Case and Tyler Whittaker have signed permanent deals with Rochdale for this season following successful trials.
Yeah, and the big news coming out of League One last week was that Jason Payne has become the first coach to depart his club this season after Newcastle announced they were releasing him from his position. Funders started the season with back-to-back defeats to Doncaster and, of course, my Coventry Bears, and funders say that Payne will now take a 3-month break from all duties, with his future involvement to be discussed thereafter. Payne's been with the club for well over a decade, 12 years in fact, serving as player and then coach. Assistant coach Tim Rumford and academy manager Michael Heap were in caretaker charge of the team for the weekend's trip to London Scholars, and we had a fan view in on this one, Mark.
Yeah, Paul Chamberlain said at least it shows that Chunder mean business, and so they should be given the money that. And so should they be given the money that has been invested. In both games, they easily scored enough points to win, but leaked them like a sieve. That's down to coaching, and with only 11 sides in the division, better to take action early doors. Even if Coventry were stacked with 6 Broncos, you shouldn't be losing games like that if you have any aspiration of promotion. I've got a question for you, Tim. Did these duo of caretaker managers, did one of them coach the first half and one of them the second half? Because if so, I'd know which one will get the job more long term for the trip to London Scholars. But more to the point, you're around League One. You've got some familiarity with Tim Rumford as well. So what's your take on the position, what Newcastle have chosen to do at this stage, and then what they've got in place at the moment?
I think it's absolutely ridiculous that they've got rid of someone after 2 games. I think there's no way you could make any judgment based on that little. Okay, given the shortness of the League One season, that is a chunk of the season. It's probably a bigger chunk than it would be, but even so, 2 games isn't good. It just doesn't feel good enough from a welfare point of view as much as anything. Thinking of just, and I think when someone's given that much to the club, as he posted, I don't know if you saw the tweet where he said he'd spilt blood quite literally for the club, and then that's what he got in return.
So was that from him?
From him,
so he was basically saying that he's been ditched by the club. There was no sort of mutuality in it.
There was no
conversation.
What came across was very much that it was he'd been given the Spanish Archer. And,
right, because I did wonder if there was any element of him kind of
saying he'd had enough, or he wasn't up to the level.
Was the task and the pressure of that sort of task, because where he started at Newcastle and where they are now with the kind of expectation is a very different place. Gateshead were the whipping boys for a while. Earlier on, when he was kind of coming towards the back end of his playing career and starting his coaching sort of roles there. So it's a very different situation, and maybe I was wondering if he might have felt like he didn't have maybe the
coaching
right
skills and the backup, and that thing you need as a coach, which is that trust in your own experience.
Exactly. So I was wondering
that
if that
when
was
things go wrong, you can get yourself out of it. But
you're suggesting not. So what about
from what he was on Twitter last week? It definitely implied that there was a very low element was his own decision. Put it that way.
So are you hearing anything about the way forward? Is it going to be Tim Rumford and Michael Heap for the foreseeable? Do you think they're out there actually trying to recruit a more experienced coach that might be able to see them up?
I'm not sure. I think they could well bring in someone. Obviously, Michael Heap was their assistant coach up until last year, where he stood down from day-to-day involvement to take on the academy to bring more players through. So there's a possibility they could go reverse that decision and bring him back into the fold. Obviously, Tim Rumford's a very experienced coach at that level. He's obviously someone I know very well, and he's got very methodical sort of coaching structure. He's someone who will wring, the extra 5% out of players. But whether, because of the scale of their investment, he would be what they were looking for in a longer term replacement, I don't know.
Do you think they've got a chance to see how the senior players that they've brought in react to these two before they make any signings, or do you think they've got rid of Payne with any idea of who they were targeting?
I've got a feeling they've got an idea. I did hear a rumour of Neil Foreman.
Okay.
Did see that one buzzing around the internet. So whether that's, obviously he's got a connection up there, and he's got experience in some regard, in a head coaching capacity. Whether him, and potentially it could be with Tim Rumford as his assistant, or the other way around, that he was assisting Tim Rumford. I don't know how that would work, but that could be an option for them.
Fair enough. We shall see. I'm going to rattle off a few other stories from League One, Tim. So, North Wales have signed Elliot Jenkins and Joe Ryan on 1-month loan deals from Rochdale. London Scholars have handed a new 1-year contract to centre Lamek Juma, I don't know how you pronounce that.
Juma, I think, yeah.
Former Tonga and New Zealand international Fui Moi Moi has re-signed with Workington for 2019.
Just in time for their game with Coventry in 2 weeks' time, so he can be reunited with his best friend Peter Ryan.
And then Huddersfield forward John-Luke Kirby has joined Hunslet on loan. The 20-year-old has signed a 1-month deal with the League One side. What about outside of the club game? What's been going on?
Yep, Steve McCormack will leave Wigan to join Charity Rugby League Cares as transition manager in March. The appointment will see McCormack work alongside full-time players as they approach the back end of their playing careers to help them prepare for life after rugby. It also provides support to players across the game alongside the club's dedicated player welfare managers. Yeah,
he's done a really good job at Wigan in a similar-ish role, in the player welfare side of things. So, and he's an experienced guy who knows a lot about rugby league too. So I think it's a bit of a loss to Wigan's overall setup.
Brains trust, to be completely kind of honest.
I think he's worked well with a lot of the younger players as they're kind of, because Wigan have got a big academy, and all those people are going to go on to play for Wigan Warriors. So I think he's worked really well with the players, and the wider community stuff he's done. So I think it's a really good appointment for Rugby League Cares. I think he's going to really connect with all the players that he comes into contact with. So I really think that it's a good appointment.
Yeah, I definitely think, because he's the one sense you got from him as a coach was he was someone who was quite caring and very nurturing and very good at kind of, he was really a people coach rather than a player coach, if that makes sense. He was kind of thinking about the whole person, and I think that will really help him in that role.
Yep. Former Widnes forward Charlie Gubbers hung up his boots, aged just 28. The New Zealander joined the Vikings ahead of the qualifiers last season, but was released following their relegation from Super League. Gubb was close to signing a deal with London in the off-season, but the Broncos decided against offering him a contract. Frank Endicott, who's his agent, said...
Former Coach of the Year, Frank Endicott.
He said he has left Rugby League and he's doing a teaching job in Wellington. So that sums that one up. What about what we've been hearing from the NRL this week? Do you want to take us through some interesting stuff that's come out of the NRL?
Yeah, the National Rugby League's terrible off-season cannot and will not ever be repeated, says its chief executive, Mr. Todd Greenberg. formerly of the Canterbury Bulldogs, of course. Every fan has been appalled by the procession of off-field indiscretions. I would hope that the sanctions being handed down will remind clubs and players that there are significant consequences for not complying with the standards and rules we set for our game, said the 48-year-old Greenberg. 2 players have been stood down this week after being accused of domestic violence and sexual assault. Both Dylan Walker and Jack de Belin have been stood down on the no-fault stand-down policy. We've already put Ben Barber out of the game. The prominent player has had his registration cancelled and his privilege to play in the game withdrawn. Barber was deregistered by the NRL after footage emerged of him in an alleged physical altercation with his partner, while Canterbury Bulldogs new star forward Dylan Napper was fined 10% of his salary by the NRL after videos emerged of him online engaging in lewd activities. The videos I've seen are gross, juvenile and disrespectful, said Greenberg. If there was a grading in our system for stupidity, this behaviour would be at the very top.
I think they probably occurred when he was gross and juvenile, to be honest. They're that old. But yeah, firm lines in the sand being drawn by the NRL to turn around that image.
I think what he said there, that having the privilege of playing the game is exactly spot on. It's the sort of thing that you and I and everyone's really banged on about for quite some time, that it is a privilege to play the game at the highest level. Therefore, if you do something, you can expect to have that privilege removed.
Yeah, and, there definitely is a buzz around this integrity unit now that they're doing stuff about these things. There's, investigations into things old and new that are getting raised to try and, like I say, rebrand the image of the sport, which is, I think, important after some of the stuff that has been going on. And it's maybe important because of the financial bottom line. Tim, do you want to take us through the news that we've heard about that as well?
Yep, so a year after the NRL needed to seek a loan following successive financial losses, the game's governing body has delivered a stunning turnaround to announce a 42.8 million Australian dollar profit on the back of increased broadcast sponsorship and digital revenue. Total consolidated revenue for the 2018 season was 499 million, a 40% increase.
Yeah, you're right. This is all boring.
377 million
more
game.
Money.
Yeah, they're making more. This is like when you used to get Tom to read out the disciplinary statements,
and the deals
isn't
with
it?
Nine and Fox are the main kind of thing, but then digital revenue's gone up by by 17 million Aussie dollars as well.
That's that stupid platform that's expensive, isn't it?
So that's really good for the NRL. So hopefully, we find a way to get Aussies spending more money on our game as well, please. And finally, Eddie Hemmings will retire from rugby league commentating, a position he's held with Sky Sports since 1990, after this year's Good Friday derby between Wigan and St Helens. For a quarter of a century, Eddie and Mike Stevo Stevenson, who we saw at the London game actually on Sunday, were the voice of rugby league on Sky. And since Stevo's retirement in 2016, Eddie has joined forces with the likes of Barry McDermott and Terry O'Connor, with the presentation done by Brian Carney. It's been an honour and a privilege to work for Sky Sports for nearly 30 years, said Hemmings on announcing his retirement. When Steve-O retired, I'd said I'd give it a couple more years without him, and with Terry O'Connor and Barry McDermott alongside me, the fun has never stopped. There are far too many people to thank, but I'd just like to single out our heads of rugby league, Neville Smith, and the most brilliant of researchers, Ian Proctor, who have made my job so easy. Also to the Super League coaches who have trusted me and shared information with me, a huge debt of gratitude to all of them. I'll miss it, there's no doubt about that. But now I will have more time for my wife and family. My wife Carol and I have many adventures planned. To coin a phrase from Super League itself, it's a whole new era for us and new beginnings. And Paul Chamberlain got in touch on this one as well. He said, about time, good servant and all that, but marketing and profile of the game needs to have been modernised a long time ago. Just as Carney has brought a fresh professionalism to the presenter's role, hopefully they can freshen up the commentator position.
It's weird, isn't it? Because you sort of knew this day was going to come, but he's just always been there.
Throughout my
for as long as I've been involved in rugby league, there's only been one Sky commentator, and that's been Eddie.
Exactly, yeah. So